This is House Planning Help, episode 13.
Have you always wanted to build your dream home? Maybe you know what you want. But what if it could be better? HousePlanningHelp.com. Speaking to the experts, searching for better ways, planning for the future. Build a better home. HousePlanningHelp.com podcast.
Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and coming up, we discuss getting to the build with a couple who have just got underway, and why I've started to wonder whether, in the future, might there be a stronger case for demolishing period properties and replacing them with greener alternatives.
HousePlanningHelp.com.
Hey, how are you? Hope everything's okay. And we have a really informative interview coming up with Jason and Lucy Reeve, who I think work really well as a husband and wife team. We'll take some tips from them, definitely. But I've had quite a week in general. It started when my wife alerted me to a story about a local property that's being demolished. And this is called Pontsbourne Park. It's from the 19th century. It's a country estate in a little village, but it's owned by our big supermarket in the UK. The equivalent, if you're in America, to Walmart. In the UK, we have Tesco. And to be fair to Tesco, the property is hugely inadequate for what they want to use it for. They want an academy, they want something that's state of the art, that's energy efficient, much better than what's there at the moment. The layout isn't good. I should think the air quality of this new building will be much better. So I'm in a very odd position. A year or so back, I would have immediately said, they're knocking down an old building. How can they do that? And I'd be writing a letter and complaining about that. But now I can see both sides. I don't want them to knock down the old building, but then I also can see the advantages of going this way and having a more energy efficient building that's also perfectly designed for their needs. So it got me thinking, because in order to save the building, you would have to make more of a case for it to be future-proof. And we've been having this discussion on and off over the last couple of episodes, but it has made me embrace the passive house retrofit a little bit more, or Enefit if you're doing it to that standard. Because if our old housing stock is brought up to something that's much lower energy, it almost has to be, doesn't it? And that's what this article that I've written goes into more detail about. But I feel if we get a few years down the road, it could be 10, 20, 40 years down the road, and we've got all this housing stock that we haven't done anything with, and we want to make it energy efficient, the job will be too big. Whereas if we start it now and future-proof it now, then maybe there'll be less of a case for knocking down more of these old buildings. And that's almost how I see this case, as this is just the beginning, isn't it? It's the little tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more that could come, which is why I want your comments. Maybe I'm going completely over the top here and I'm talking nonsense. Please get interactive on this article, because I think it's an important one. You'll find it at houseplanninghelp.com/13. That's the show notes for this session. It's time for today's main content, and we're going client side again with a couple who I believe have really done their homework. So let's meet them.
HousePlanningHelp.com. The interview.
I'm with Jason and Lucy Reeve today, and we're doing a case study looking at their project so far, which has just about got to the build stage, which is very exciting for them. So we're going to see what lessons they have learnt, how they got going. First of all, hello.
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 And when exactly did you come up with this idea that you wanted to build a house?
It was really born out of the fact that we couldn't find anything to buy that was appropriate. We had looked for a long time for a renovation project and missed out on a house that we really fell in love with. But in hindsight, are so pleased we did miss out on it, because that just fueled the fire to end up buying some land for redevelopment. And luckily enough, we managed to find a plot that had planning permission already granted. And once we realised that was a possibility, there was no looking back, really, was there?
No, it's been a long journey. We probably started looking about 4 years ago. We've owned the site for 2 years, over 2 years now. And yeah, started the build 2 weeks ago. So it takes a long time.
Lucy, is this something that you wanted just as much as Jason?
Not at the beginning. like Jason said, we were looking to renovate somewhere, and we both liked the idea of an older style property with its features. But when Jason then first started talking about possibly us building a new house, I think it was me then that really took with that idea. And then the more we started looking at properties to renovate, the more I had in my head that we would just be making do. And if I could start from scratch, I could have everything that I wanted. So I think once he'd planted the idea, I think I probably overtook, and then that was it. And then I think I sort of stopped refusing to look at other houses to renovate, and it was all about looking at somewhere where we could either knock something down or where we could completely start from scratch.
For me, having seen the plans of what you're building at the moment and having those initial ideas of the property you wanted, they're two vastly different things. So, Jason, how did you come to this idea together? Take us through that process.
I think, as is the case with most already built houses or flats or properties that you move into, you change your life to fit in with the property. And the one completely and utterly different factor with doing what we're doing now is that it's the other way round. We decided, rather than to give a prescriptive idea to the architect of what we wanted the house to look like, all we did was tell him how we wanted to live within the building. And then he used his skills to come up with a blueprint to show us how we could live in the newly built house. And that was quite a revelation for us. I've done refurbishments before with houses that I've lived in, and you tend to have to compromise. There's always a compromise. And we're hoping that this won't be the case, that we'll have to compromise in this property. So once it started to evolve and you can discuss with the architect using his skills how something can be done, he then gives you many, many other ideas that you can try and incorporate within the property.
I think that's great, and I know the more that I look into this, the more I can understand what you're saying. I've had in my mind the type of house that I've wanted, and I think I'm staying a little bit more open to the various options. Lucy, what was on the brief, or what from your side of things did you add to the brief?
I think, as Jason said, we gave the architect more of an idea of how we wanted to live inside the house. But we also found that quite hard because, like he said, you tend to move into a house and you live within the house. So when you're actually starting from a blank piece of paper, it is actually very difficult to decide, well, what would we do if we could do anything we wanted to do? And so I think the ideas came from there, that we wanted quite a social house. If you have people over, everyone congregates in the kitchen, even if you don't want them to. So we've got a very open social area that will include our kitchen, dining room and lounge. And for us, I think that idea came quite quickly. Again, we've never lived like this, so we're hoping it's going to work out, but it's still very much at the design and planning stage. So yeah, it'll be interesting to know in a couple of years' time if we've got all those things right, because at the moment it is just, I guess, dream and guesswork on our part that's how we would like to live if we were able to.
You sound like you know a lot about this process, but I'm imagining you didn't. And this is what I always find when I meet people who've been through the process. I know that your house is getting built right now, so you're not all the way through, but that's what's interesting, just getting up to the point where they are laying the foundations and the building is going up. So how did you find out what the process was and get into that, Jason?
The process itself has evolved as well. When we first started thinking about the idea, we wanted it to be, we felt we had a responsibility to start with to build something that was very low energy. And we did a fair amount of research to try and find ways in which that could be done. The first part of the process really was contacting the Royal Institute of British Architects to try and get a referral for architects that have been involved in low energy buildings in the past. And we shortlisted those and went to interview those, and just to get a feel really as to what they could do for us.
So how many people did you interview?
We interviewed, I think, 6 out of the 8 that REBA recommended to us. And that was a really worthwhile process. It was quite time consuming, and the experiences differed significantly as well. But I think that was a good thing because it just manages to allow you to crystallise your own thinking, as to the kind of building that you're interested in building, but also as to the kind of characters that you're interested in working with. Some guys are quite prescriptive. They tell you what they want, rather than other architects that are much more interested in listening to you and trying to understand what you want to achieve out of what is effectively for us our lifetime dream home. And I could never have imagined that I would allow an architect to say, right, no, this is what you need. I'm telling you this is going to be the best way forward. That's just the exact opposite of what we've ended up with, a house that we do truly believe, or we hope we're going to end up with a house that we do truly believe is perfect for us. Our architect really managed to get into our minds and understand what we wanted out of it. So I suppose, to go back to your original question, the low energy was always number one on the list. And I suppose most of your listeners will probably do the same thing, as you read as much as you possibly can to try and understand, as a layman, what you're looking for. And eco houses tend to be light and tight or mass and glass. And we've completely changed our direction. Originally, I felt that I wanted to live in a house that was very heavyweight, high thermal mass. I've always lived in either a brick or block built house before. I like the way it feels, I like the way it performs, but we've ended up choosing to go down the timber frame route and having not a SIPS building, but a very low U-value timber frame building insulated with warm cell, which is recycled newspaper.
So you're going for a lot of insulation? And
We are, yes. Yeah, we are going to still try and achieve passive house standards. That's the ultimate aim. I never realised at the start of this process that the PHPP package, which is the passive house planning package, was something that you could not mess with, but you can lower the U value of a wall and maybe then increase the U value of a window if it will still allow the building to perform and still match passive house standards. It's not something that we are totally and utterly beholden to. I'm a subscriber of the Home Building and Renovating magazine, and people in there often write to be beholden to the PHPP package is sometimes probably not the best way to look at it. Ultimately, we don't want a hermetically sealed box. We want a family home. So to be focusing on something just so prescriptive is sometimes maybe not the best thing to experience.
Lucy, how much have you got into finding out about all of this? Have you been surprised how much you've enjoyed learning about how you build a house and some of the ways to make it more energy efficient?
Yeah, obviously Jason leads the way with that. He's, like he said, he's been subscribing to this Home Building magazine for, I don't know, about 4 years now. But we've been to several of their shows. We've been to some eco-build shows and open houses, which I always find very helpful. There's nothing better than talking to other people who've either done it or trying to do the same thing. And they do give you lots of help and guidance. And there is, I don't know if anyone's ever been to the eco-build show, which takes up the whole of the Excel Centre. It is huge. And if you walk in there and see 200 companies selling solar panels, it can be a very, very daunting. And I do find that side of things still quite hard to get to grips with. But we've been learning all the way, and we're still learning now. Having got a project manager on board a few months ago, we've already realised that there'd been lots of things that we wouldn't have been able to do ourselves. There's still just lots of technical issues, especially with the drawings, that he's helped us a lot with, along with the architect and our timber frame designers. But yeah, when they all get involved and they're all asking lots of different questions, sometimes it's very hard to keep up with specifically what they're talking about.
Does it matter, though, that you can't understand fully what they're saying? Or?
Not always, and I don't mind. I'm quite happy to be the person that might ask that stupid question. Sometimes
I ask them all the time.
Yeah, and sometimes Jason said to me, "Well, of course, you know, you got to assume they're doing that." And I've learned. I said, "Well, actually, let's not assume. I quite happily ask them, and if I look stupid, I look stupid." But we've found out a couple of times that actually we've asked a question, and actually nobody's either thought about it or it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. So it's a question of saying, well, no, hang on a minute, we don't agree with that. Let's take that one step back. So yeah, you do. You don't have to get into minute detail with everything, but you do have to keep on top of everything. And why wouldn't you? It's our house, it's our dream home, and we're the ones that care about it the most. Like I said, we're just starting the third week of build, and I've been out there every day since, sometimes a couple of times a day, and we're so
hold on. You've been on site every day?
Every day, yeah.
But you've got a project manager.
Oh, I know, but, there's nothing, I like to go and see what's happening and take a few photos and ask a few questions. And I just think, like I said, it's our house, so no one's going to care about it as much as we do. And plus as well, we've been looking at pieces of paper for almost 2 years now. And when you see it, some things look completely different in the flesh, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. And I guess sometimes it can be, even now, there are a few things we're going to be able to tweak. So if we didn't see it, we're not going to know about it. But yeah, it's been a great experience to go out there. So take lots of photos and keep track of what's happening. It changes every day. So
you mentioned a couple of years. Does that mean that some things have surprised you about how long they've taken?
The biggest surprise was the length of time it has taken us to get planning permission, ultimately for the exact same design that we wanted originally 2 years ago, which sounds rather odd, and I'm sure there are lots of people that have had similar experiences. What we found was originally the planning authority was extremely supportive in what we wanted to do. They didn't want a pastiche of what had gone before. They didn't want something that was not part of what they considered to be the vernacular. When we started talking about the performance of the building and a low energy building, they were very, very supportive. But ultimately it came down to what they liked the look of, and the fact that they didn't understand what a passive house was, which again may surprise some of your listeners, but that was the case. The architect had to explain to the planning officer exactly what we were trying to achieve. And I think we suffered because of that. But it just made us more determined, particularly with the housing ministry in this country saying that, generally speaking, this kind of project should get the green light almost automatically without us having to do any further due diligence and proving how the building was going to perform. So that was the biggest surprise, I think. Also, the length of time it's taken to try and specify a lot of the building. We knew there was going to be a lot of work involved, but to try and ensure that as many decisions that we have taken don't change once the building starts to be built. We've seen so many case studies, read so many and seen so many on TV where changes end up costing the clients a hell of a lot more money than their budget gives them the ability to build. So we're trying, or we have tried as much as we possibly can, to nail every single decision down. And as Lucy said, some of the areas with the building method that we've chosen, we do have flexibility. So if a plug socket needs to be moved 18 inches to the left, wherever, we can do that. Whereas in SIPS buildings, it's impossible to do that once the frame is built, either in Sweden or Germany or Austria, wherever you get the thing from. So we wanted that flexibility. That's ended up being a really good thing.
Is that one of the reasons you selected a project manager, so that now you can hand over that authority and you don't need to worry too much about making changes? Or I'm not even really sure what a project manager does. Yeah, I know that they're there on site to answer all the questions.
Sort of is the answer. We had an architect that doesn't project manage, so we knew that there was going to be a gap there. We had chosen a timber frame erector and designer and manufacturer who didn't project manage. We knew that we could either go down the subcontracting route or a main contractor route, the cost differences of which are quite significant. And when we had our first site meeting with the architect, the timber frame designer, the timber frame erector, Lucy's father is an underfloor heating engineer, and it soon became clear to us that there was a void, and that void needed to be filled with somebody that was pretty much an expert in the field of energy efficient buildings, but just as importantly was going to control the purse strings, because we could easily see how a situation may arise that we, as Lucy again mentioned earlier, we thought we were talking about the same thing, where in actual fact we were talking about cross purposes. And again, I know through experience and from case studies that that is a clear way in which the budget can spiral out of control. So the project manager is overseeing pretty much everything, but paying a particular emphasis on costs, because we do have a finite budget.
Lucy, you seem to work very well as a couple. Is there some strategy to this, or are you hiding something that when I walk out the door,
I don't think so. I think it's something you both have to want to do, because, as Jason's alluded to, it takes up a lot of your time. I'm sure if you interviewed all of our friends, they would tell you how bored they are about hearing about a house that doesn't exist yet, and they've been hearing about it for a couple of years and it still doesn't exist. But it's been our life for a couple of years and will probably now continue to be our life for another year while it's being built. So you both have to be 100% behind doing it. Otherwise, I think that's what would cause problems. So I think because we're both very keen to build it, then that's worked. I think we're quite a strong couple anyway, so I think that helps. And yeah, we've been, like I said, it's been going on for a while now, and Jay said all the problems we've come up against, it has just made us a bit more determined to be able to achieve it. And I guess we're both quite similar in that respect, that we're kind of the attitude that we'll prove everyone wrong and we will have our house and it'll be lovely. So
I'll echo that sentiment, as well as it is about compromise. It's not only compromise with regards to the budget, compromise with regards to the size and the location, and it's also about compromising with each other. This is like anything you buy together. One of you will always prefer certain aspects, whether it's a car or whether it's a holiday or whether it's a piece of art to hang on the wall. The house is no different. We both have things that we will absolutely love within the house, and other things that maybe we think to ourselves, well, I could have taken that or left it. So it's really important that you both get certain areas within the house meant for you.
the way we've done it is there's sort of key rooms that we're both interested in, or we've taken the lead in. So, for example, I've said the kitchen, that's mine. I'm having exactly what I want in the kitchen. That's where I spend the majority of the time in there. And Jason's getting the basement. He can do whatever he wants with the basement. So I think in that respect, it's areas that we'll be able to put our own stamp on. Not that the other person will hate it. You know, they've been able to influence and say what they like and don't like. But we have given ourselves some areas where we've said, yep, okay, you can do what you want there and I'll do what I want here. And I think that's kind of... And then it helps to sort of balance out the other sort of neutral areas where you can both give and take on things.
I have to say, if Lucy's strategy is just to spend all the money in the kitchen, so I'm left with a dark, empty box downstairs, then you can scratch this interview and we'll go through the divorce courts.
Now, come on, we'll have none of that. In terms of financing, did you use any special ways of financing this, or is this all money that you've saved up? And when did you know, now I've got the right amount of money?
Well, the house that we went for at auction 4 or 5 years ago now, we needed to show that we had our existing house up for sale. We need to have a hefty deposit. So we ended up speaking to a neighbour of ours at the time who had sold their house on the internet. Lucy just took some pictures, posted the advert on the internet, and we sold our house on the internet and were left with the cash from the house that we used as a deposit for this. So we had the cash for the land, and then it's just been a case of, as it's taken such a long while to get to where we've got to, we've just been putting every spare amount of money aside. We rent the house that we're currently living in. So at the moment, hopefully it will be self-financing, but there are a reasonable number of quite attractive financing options available for self-builders. Different areas of advancement, I think the majority of them are about 50% once you get out of the ground. So they're quite attractive and reasonable interest rates as well compared to the rest of the market. So if push does come to shove, then that will be the way forward.
Well, it does sound like you've got a lot of the different angles covered here. Just as we wrap up this interview, is there anything you would have done differently on the approach to the build?
I don't think so. I mean, we have already touched on the difficulties we've had with the planners, and we felt that we'd approach them the right way round, as in we met with them very early on, discussed our very original sketches and ideas with them, and the response we got back from them was very keen. I think the only piece of advice I'd give on that would be to take minutes of meetings you have with planning officers, and then you can both agree afterwards what was said and what was discussed and what was agreed. Although when I say agreed, they do keep their responses quite vague. So
definitely confirming what was discussed in the meeting by email or even by a hard copy letter, I think would be definitely beneficial. So you could refer back to something that was previously mentioned in a meeting, particularly if you're doing something not necessarily groundbreaking, but doing something different. And I think it has to be acknowledged at the start, both from your perspective and the planning department's perspective, that it will be seen as different. If, of course, it is different. You know, if it's next door to another eco house, then it's absolutely fine. I think there's more of a chance of that being successful. But in our case, it was completely different. The plot is next to a listed timber frame building, and we always knew there would be concessions that we would have to make for that. So Lucy's advice is absolutely spot on. We wished we'd have done that. The architect and other people we've consulted said that it would have been a lot easier had we been able to refer back to conversations that we had where they had specifically given their blessing and agreed to many, many design facets of the building.
And is there any advice that you would like to pass on to anyone going into this process that could help them in any particular area?
Definitely, the more people you can speak to, the better. That stood us in good stead. Doing your research never cost you anything other than time. Probably trying to have an idea as to how you would like to proceed from the outset. Certain aspects of the way we have gone about it, for example, the fact that we have ended up with a light and tight building rather than mass and glass, it would have been useful if we'd been able to be informed enough to make that decision early on and maybe had a few more ducks lined up in a row, so when we were ready to pull the trigger and we did get the go-ahead from the planning authorities, we could have had a little bit more information to hand or even some contractors to hand.
Yeah, but I'd also say on that respect, I think, as Jason said, we originally started with the mass and glass direction, and that's the main area that the architect works from. And in fact, obviously then come full circle. But from my point of view, I think we've got the best of both worlds, because the architect wouldn't have designed the houses designed had we gone down the light and tight method. So I think actually we've got quite a different design than you'd get from most SIPS buildings or similar buildings to that. So I think sometimes going about it the way that we have, we've actually ended up with something that would have been a bit different had we started with the light and tight method first, even though it probably seems to a lot of people we've gone all round the houses to get to where we are. The only other thing I would say, and I don't know if other people do it, a few people we went and sort of made comments on it, but we put together a scrapbook for our architect and other people that we've seen, and that was just made from things that we liked and things that we didn't like. As we've said, we tried very hard not to have a set idea in our head of what the house should look like from the outset, because I think at the time we didn't have a plot, so location can make a difference. You can have different restrictions and sites make a difference to how a house looks. So I think it's a good idea if you can keep away from having an idea of what you want your house to look like. But we did put together lots of images and things that we'd seen over the few years that we've been trying to get this off the ground of what we didn't and didn't like. And they were different. The comments in the book show what I like and what Jason likes, and they're not always the same thing. But I think when we picked the architect, it gave him a good understanding of what we wanted out of the house. And like I said, we've got a lighting designer involved now as well. So, different people we've shown the book to have said how helpful it's been. So that would be another piece of advice I might give somebody.
And it's very, very neat as well.
Thank you.
Well, it's been fantastic to chat to you. I'd just like to thank you both, and good luck. I can't wait to see this building.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you head to the show notes for this episode, you can actually see an artist's impression of what their building will look like, and it's fantastic. And also a couple of pictures of them in very big holes. houseplanninghelp.com/13 is where the show notes are for this episode. It's funny that planning permission came up again. I do try to avoid this topic if you're listening outside the UK. I know it's of no relevance, but maybe you smile to yourself and think, God, those crazy Brits, what are they up to? I heard a story the other day. This is great. This is more for comic value than use. I have a friend who has built a house using structural insulated panels. SIP panels, as actually came up in this episode. And when he was trying to get planning permission for his building, he was told, oh, no, you need to move it 3 feet forwards. So we moved it 3 feet forwards on the plans and resubmitted it a few months later. And then the same planning people said, I think what we need to do here is move it a metre back from the road. So he'd gone 3 feet forwards and moved a metre back. It's a great system. No doubt we'll have more stories about that in the future. News of another episode that I really want to do, and this is ever since our interview with Dr. Brenda Boardman. It was episode 11. If you haven't heard that, go back and have a listen because it's a really good one. But there was this bit at the end when I asked her, what would you like us to do if we could do something? And she said, I'll read from the transcript, I'd like everybody to be a little bit more politically active. When was the last focus on the environment in any general election or local authority election? How much does the government really know about what you and I are really concerned about? Are we actually hidden from policies and politics? And I've thought about that quite a lot since I had that chat with Dr. Boardman and what I could do personally, which I'm doing in a way. I've created this podcast, this website, which is because I feel strongly about energy efficiency, that it's something we should all be pursuing. And a lot of us are not, or we're going for creating all the energy first, nuclear power. And climate change is only going to be a bigger topic each year that goes by. Which is why I wonder whether it might be worth us doing an episode on content marketing, because it's what I've done here. I've created content about a topic that I'm passionate about, and I've attracted people who engage with this content. You. Hopefully you're enjoying it, hopefully you're finding it useful, but you can do exactly the same because you all have a different outlook on life. And that's what the internet is great for. Anyone can have a voice, although it takes a little bit of time to build up a platform. And that's why I think an episode on this would be really useful if you are that person thinking, what can I do? I'd like to help, I'd like to do something. Just to start learning about content marketing, because it's not something you can do overnight. It takes a bit of time. I'm 6 months into this and nearly at 10,000 downloads for the podcast, which is fantastic, but it's taken me that time to get there, and I'm hoping things will speed up the longer I keep doing this. If I start my YouTube side and get more great content on there, things will speed up again, but it all takes time. So coming soon, we're going to have that episode. It'll be nothing to do with house building or energy efficiency. You can skip it if you really want to, but I think it's going to be valuable, and I have a great guest, which I'm going to keep in secret for now and tell you about in a future episode. Okay. Next time on the podcast from houseplanninghelp.com, more great content because we talk about low energy barn conversions with Bill Butcher from the Green Building Store. Do not miss that episode.
You've been listening to Ben Adam Smith on the path to build a better home. Sign up now to the free email newsletter. Head to houseplanninghelp.com.